Weiner has a challenge. He seems, if these reports are accurate, to keep going back to his sexting habits. And one suspects that Huma Abedin, his wife, is very sincere when she says that, she tried very hard. They made sincere efforts to try and make it work. But when someone won't change, that's usually the root of things getting ugly and complicated in a marriage. The problem, of course, is that this plays out right against the presidential race. And there is simply no question that Hillary Clinton has no closer aide than the woman involved in this very sad circumstance.
So tell us about the history of Huma Abedin, because she begins as an intern, a simple intern, and then she rises through the ranks to become the vice chair of the Clinton campaign.
Well, and much more than that. I mean, you have to give people a title, right? But the real title, I would think, for Huma Abedin is closest aide to Hillary Clinton, the person who is more often than not at Hillary Clinton's side. And by all accounts, two things that are important. One, the person that Hillary Clinton turns to, along with Bill Clinton, for kind of core counsel, really close discussion of important issues and how to approach things. And number two, the person who is widely seen as someone you should know if you want to have contact with or, talk with Hillary Clinton. Not a gatekeeper per se, but certainly a person that can help with the conversation. And that makes her a tremendously powerful individual, a tremendously important individual by any measure in American politics. And to have a scandal like this play out, as secondary as it may be in many senses, at this point, right on the eve of the Labor Day weekend when the fall presidential race begins, I think is a challenge for Hillary Clinton because, as you suggested, she's been out of the limelight a little of late, and suddenly back in the limelight with this story. Hardly the way you'd want to get attention.
Oh, indeed. Does it invite comparison? I wonder, in a way, the two women they've now both suffered at the hands of their husbands' sexual peccadillos, haven't they?
Well, there will be those who make that point. And I am not qualified to begin to analyze why people associate with other folks or where they might find common ground. But certainly this is something that each of them has been dragged through. Each of them has found themselves in the midst of a highly publicized, frankly, pretty embarrassing circumstance. They didn't cause the embarrassment. Their husbands did. But it's one that especially with the nature of our American media, which has become very obsessed with personal relationships, very obsessed with, all of these kinds of stories. It's a hard thing, and I suppose it does, for those who've been through it, they probably do find some place of, some ability to commiserate with one another. But I'd be careful about going too far down that line, because I can tell you from covering these folks, usually from afar, but seeing them in a lot of different settings, these are very, very professional people, very serious, issue-oriented folks who, in both the case of Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin, have been very, very close to power, very, very close to the biggest issues of our times for a long while. And I think that their trust in one another, their connection with one another, is rooted in that rather than a shared embarrassing experience.
Well, I don't propose to spend the whole half hour talking about this, but I will give Patrick Basham a chance at this, because Patrick joins us now from the independent think tank, the Democracy Institute in Washington. Hello, Patrick.
Hi, Rod.
Now, putting Donald Trump to one side, is this going to be a big political cost for Hillary Clinton, or something that she can fairly easily get over?
I suspect it'll be somewhere in between, at least in the near term. It's embarrassing by association. I think what makes it difficult initially is that Huma Abedin has been in the news more than usual in recent days. And so therefore, I mean, she's not a household name, but she's close to being a household face. Her photo has been everywhere, and she is always in the same photo, or the same caption, the same photo, it seems, as Hillary Clinton. So it's been a bad few days for Hillary Clinton, and Huma Abedin has been part of that, in terms of her name has been part of that. And so this, reinforces a negative, even though the details obviously are very different and they have nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. But one of the reasons I think, perhaps the main reason why I think that this won't be an ongoing problem, is that it is so clearly a problem of the husband of her top aide. It has nothing to do with any fault of Huma Abedin, or in this case, Hillary Clinton. And I suspect that Mr. Weiner's wife, or probably soon-to-be ex-wife, will receive quite a bit of sympathy, as she should. And so, I think that if the Trump people leave this alone, which I also think they should do, that this will not be one of the larger obstacles for Hillary Clinton's campaign going forward.
Let me ask you both about the latest polls. ABC made mention of a poll there which it was suggesting had halved Hillary Clinton's apparent lead nationally over Donald Trump. And I'm looking at Nate Silver's 538 page, John, and he was giving her a sort of an edge through complicated maths of something like 87% just after the Republican convention. This has shrunk a little bit now to 78% over Donald Trump's 21%. Is there a movement in the polls here? Is this beginning to be something that the Clinton campaign will be seriously worried about?
Well, I think the Clinton campaign will always be worried, and they should be, for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is the most volatile year America has seen politically in a long time, and so even if you've got a lead, you have to be a little bit concerned. Secondly, I think there's good evidence to believe that Donald Trump probably underpolls a little bit, that because he has been so controversial, had so many scandals. I mean, here we started out talking about, some things over on the Clinton side, which I don't think actually, I agree very much with my colleague here. I don't think that people should see them as very much what's been happening here, very much part of the campaign. But Trump has had self-generated trouble at such a high level that I think there's a chunk of people who simply don't want to say they're going to vote for Trump. And so when you see a large undecided, you have to be worried. So I'll say that up front. But then let me offer this counsel. Any given day from now until the start of November, you are going to see polling from some new company or some new university that shows some movement in their own polling. I think what we have to do is step back and recognize a couple things. One, by and large, a national poll is not that big a deal. What Nate Silver does, where he goes into these states and looks at where you need to win to get the electoral votes to become president, is much more significant. And while Silver and others have seen some movement, you still have to recognize when you're on the 78 side of the 78-21 split, you still have a very significant advantage. And certainly that you could see movement there. But at this point, when I look at the battleground states, and I did this just the other day, looked down at all the major battleground states, Hillary Clinton was leading in all of them, or in some cases it was very close. So I wouldn't want to overplay that, but she's clearly got. I would still say she clearly has the advantage in this race.
Patrick, any thoughts from you?
Well, I mean, I largely agree with what John said, in macro and micro terms. But I do think in this race that I think there have been, and there could still be a number of national shifts that move everything one way or another. I mean, if there is a dramatic change, I suspect it will be in Trump's direction. But it could be in Hillary's direction, and she could go from what she has now, which is an apparent small but steady lead in most polls, to a huge landslide type effect. But I suspect that there are going to be states in November that are going to move, or will have moved by then, en masse in one direction or another. Therefore, if Trump pulls this out, he may pull it out not by a few electoral votes, but he may pull in states that have shifted along with a lot of battleground states. He may have pulled in some blue states, just as Hillary, if she runs the table of the battleground swing states, she may also pull in some red states. So I all to say, I think there's still a lot to see yet, and that because of the debates coming up and other things, external factors that could influence this, I think we could still be looking at some national shifts.
You mentioned the debates. I mean, the first debate proper isn't until late September, but there is something called the Commander-in-Chief Forum, which is a sort of TV event at which they appear one after the other, coming up next week. When you start to get TV, Patrick, in this, and they are actually going head to head, is that the point at which people who haven't been engaged, and there are a lot of those people, seriously do become engaged and really start to make up their mind?
Well, there will certainly be a significant slice of the electorate that either hasn't been paying much attention or has been paying attention but has not decided, and they may use those TV appearances, whether it's the formal debates or these, as you say, the back-to-back TV appearances, to form a definitive opinion. It may be a wash in terms of how that breaks down, but it could also be that defining moment. I mean, the Trump people obviously are looking for a Ronald Reagan 1980 against Jimmy Carter type of debate performance that reassures all those people who don't want to re-elect Jimmy Carter, but are concerned that Reagan's just not steady enough, not safe enough to be president.
Yeah.
And
Trump,
the Trump people,
yes.
the Trump people think that he is seen as temperamentally volatile, to put it mildly, but the issues, the state of the country verdict is in. People don't want a third term, but if they're not comfortable with Trump, well, they'll vote for Hillary as the least worst option. So and the Hillary people feel, well, what they have to do is not blow it. She has to do well enough, but not brilliantly, and they can continue to sort of, to slowly and steadily make their way to Election Day. So the first debate, I think, will be the pivotal one, and it could be that moment that, although it's only late September, that does potentially decide this.
I wonder if I could ask John about the Clinton Foundation, one of these kind of bubbling things that's kept going for the last couple of weeks. A group that does some amazing charitable work, and yet also fundraises from a lot of foreign sources, which seems to have been part of the point, John. Is the Clinton Foundation now a serious political liability for Mrs. Clinton?
I think it's gotten pretty close to that. And this is not my judgment. It's not me saying yes it is or no it's not. What I'm judging from is the tenor of newspaper editorial pages and comments from people who, at the end of the day, are almost certainly going to back Hillary Clinton for president. So it's not judging the Clinton Foundation one way or another, not judging, the defenses or attacks one way or another, but simply saying that it has moved to a place in the United States where major publications like the Washington Post and the Boston Globe And really the list goes on. And also very prominent political players like former U.S. Senator Russ Feingold, who is very likely to be reelected to the Senate, one of the key Democratic candidates this year, all talking about either in the case of some publications, the need, in Feingold's case, at least suggesting the need to consider making a clear break from the foundation, i.e. that the Clintons might need to think about either in some cases people suggesting shut it down, in other cases people saying, no, just pass it off to somebody, give someone else, move it over, give it to the Gates Foundation folks or somebody else. And I think this gets to the heart of the matter. Many of the people who have sought to defend the Clinton Foundation and the Clintons have said, well, the Clinton Foundation does a great deal of good. And that is true. I mean, by most accounts, it's pretty well accepted. And yet the question is it the only entity that could do that good? Or could you pass this on to others? Or, would others take up this responsibility? And I think that there is, I'm certainly not going to try and get into the Clintons' heads on this, but if this continues to be a source of tough stories and tough editorials and even Democrats saying, look, this just doesn't feel right, my sense is it may become necessary for the Clintons, who've already made a little bit of some efforts to at least alter the relationship and alter some operations. It may, in fact, be necessary for them to really make the break. And that's a big deal. But it's also something, remember, we're talking a lot about this right now. We're not talking a lot about Donald Trump's relationship with his business empire. And so in each case, I would suggest that each of these candidates are, as this fall goes on, going to have to discuss how they are going to deal with these very large institutions and entities with which they are associated. And in America, people do, I think, like their presidents to arrive without many ties. The preference is that a president is really responsible to the office and to the people without connections to either business or even a noble foundation.
Let me just finish with a suggestion from the weekend's New York Times. Late last week, Donald Trump called Mrs. Clinton a bigot, which struck some people as a bit absurd, and yet had a little bit of traction. Others said, well, it's just another fine mess Donald Trump's gotten himself into, except that none of it seems to stick. And the writer of this particular piece I was reading suggested that this is the end of the era of gaffe politics, where political reporters, John, pick on